Well, let's introduce the first panel discussion. It's entitled An Intelligent Future for All, Innovation, Ethics and Diversification. Advanced technologies are transforming current economic models, and as such there are some really promising opportunities out there, especially for innovators and entrepreneurs. But there are also a few concerns as well. So how can we then derive the greatest benefits of what we're calling IR 4.0 at lower costs? Well, to chair this session is a man whose face you probably know quite well from CNN International, a man who, actually, I have to say, whenever you meet people from TV, whenever you meet them, they always look much smaller than they do on TV, except this one. He's much, much taller. Would you please welcome the anchor for this session, Mr. Richard Quest. So, we have for our panelists who are going to be sharing their thoughts on the Fourth Industrial Revolution, the following people. Would you please welcome somebody who's a real expert on this, His Excellency Mr. Toomas Ilves, the former President of Estonia. His Excellency Mr. Badr Al-Olama, who's the Director of Mubadala Aerospace. His Excellency Mr. Kamal Ahmed Barani, Minister of Telecommunications and Transportation. And finally, last without least, the award-winning entrepreneur and CEO and author. Would you please give a warm welcome to Jeff Hofmann.
We're going to start with a sort of an overview of exactly what we mean and how the Fourth Industrial Revolution is progressing. It's a good opportunity to start with you, Jeff, about the actual, you saw the few hands go up on the question. I suspect a certain shyness prevents others from joining in. But are people experiencing the Fourth Industrial Revolution, is it here?
Yes, and I agree with Roy in that many people don't raise their hand because they don't even realize that how much of their day is influenced by these technologies. So much of what's happening around us is being driven by new technologies, and they come out so fast and they appear so fast that we accept them without even thinking. We just say, wow, now I can talk to my phone. I could think about that, for an example, with voice recognition. I used to type all my text. Now I say my text in voice recognition. And one day I said, well, that's interesting. I'll use that now. So the rate at which new technologies come out and how ready we are to adapt them, sometimes we don't even realize how fast this revolution came. But it is here. It's already here, and we're already using it.
Mr. President, you in Estonia became famous worldwide for many things, but the use of technology was one of them. Tell us briefly about how that came about and why a small country in the north became such a well-known place for technology.
Well, as a country that came out of or re-established its independence from Soviet occupation, we found ourselves very poor and backward compared to the countries that we were with before the Soviets, and so I proposed we digitize, and we did that.
When you proposed that, was there a lot of eyebrow raising and people saying, this man's mad?
Yes. In fact, there was a teachers' union newspaper that I think did not have a weekly issue for a year without calling me an idiot.
Oh, dear. But you persevered.
Well, yes, and it was a long journey. But now we are at a point in my country where in the relationship between the individual and the state, there are only 3 things you cannot do online. You have to show up if you want to get married. Good idea. You have to show up when you get divorced, both of you, which is not always such a good idea. And finally, on transfer of real estate to avoid anonymous shell companies. Everything else you can do online.
Voting?
Yes.
How have you managed, and I'm coming to the rest of the panel, but I'm fascinated, particularly since as a Brit we're about to go to the polls and we still go into a booth and we put a nice cross with a pencil. How have you managed to solve the security question on voting?
Well, we have a very sophisticated system using 2-factor authentication, multiple forms of authentication of your vote, and it is done online. And 44% of the population actually votes online.
Excellency, if the defence and aerospace, one always imagines as being one of those areas where fourth industrial stuff is high point. Would you agree?
I mean, you asked a question, right? You said applications of daily life. And most of us have gone on a plane, and most of us haven't realized that autopilot is a form of artificial intelligence. It's very much artificial intelligence. The pilot doesn't really need to do much. The plane can fly by itself. It can alter itself when there's turbulence. And actually, there's a very interesting story about man versus machine, right? Autopilot and computers were there as a redundancy to, let's say, misbehaviors by human beings. And the best example you have is of Eurowings, right? But today, when you look at the Boeing 737 MAX, that's when the machine takes control over the human.
Right, and on that, we'll come to all of that in a minute, certainly. But where do you think we are in terms of the fourth industrial revolution? If that's the beginning and that's coming to the end, where are we?
That's a fantastic question. We are at the early stages only because we don't have standards.
You don't have standards?
Fourth industrial revolution, IoT does not have common standards around the world.
Now, if there's one area, Minister, where the 4IR, or just let's call it the fourth, may the fourth be with you, to keep it simple. If there's one area where the fourth will be relevant, it has to be telecoms. It has to be transportation and smart transportation, which is your area.
I think AI will affect all aspects of our life. It will change the way we do our business, the skills that we need, the type of job that will be created in the future. So transportation and aviation, as my colleague said, it will be only one segment of the opportunity. I think the opportunity is almost limitless. I agree completely that we are at the start of the process. As we enhance our digital infrastructure in countries, we will enable this innovator to create the new application, the new AI, and it will, I think, go vertical in all economic sectors. So I think there are fundamentals need to exist in order to unleash these new ideas and enable these innovators to create the future generation of products and services.
Right. That is a perfect point for us to really get to grips with it. Yes?
Can I just say something about standards, though? Because that was really important when he said that we don't have standards. Because standards are, especially with policymakers in this room, standards are equal part good and bad. The good is obvious. We need standards for industries to standardize. But the fact that we don't have standards is what enables so much innovation. Innovators don't wait for standards. Innovators don't wait for policymakers. They just make stuff.
So what do innovators want?
Innovators want the standards so that they can sell their product to transportation and aviation. But we can't wait for you to create them. What happens a lot of times is policymakers look at what was created and said, that looks pretty good, let's make that the standard. So somewhere in the middle is an answer.
Think Richard, about when we used to have the mobile phone and we used to travel to places like Japan or the US, it wouldn't work, right? Because we didn't have a standard. And then came 3G, and then came 4G, and now we're at the advent of 5G, right? This is exactly what we're talking about.
I would say there is a democracy at work. The Europeans came up with GSM. The Americans had a terrible system.
CDMA.
Pardon me?
Yes.
And so eventually they say, even the U.S., which prides itself on being the center of all innovations, that actually the European system is much better, and then it's worldwide.
In my opinion, I don't think innovators are waiting for regulation to impose things on them and to stop them to create the new or the next generation of products and services. They need to work with the government, with the policymaker, to define if the regulation is needed, then we can develop something that will enable them to develop their project, but also protect the right of all other stakeholders. But I don't think the standard is what's stopping today the growth or the acceleration of the...
It's not stopping, is it, Jeff? It's not stopping, but what is it doing then? I mean, who's leading? Are the innovators ahead? Or I'll rephrase that. Are the innovators that much further ahead than the regulators? Because the nature of regulation, as we're seeing with cryptocurrency, which has suddenly been blown up by Libra, the nature of regulators is usually one stage behind.
Yes, so it's more than one stage now. And the reason is because technology comes out so fast. Every night while we sleep, somebody invented something amazing, and if you wake up and you're the first one to find it, you're the innovator. So innovators are way ahead because we've already, I'm going to say we and speak on behalf of that group, that's really where I come from. We've already tried 5 things that didn't work before you even see the one that kind of works, that you look at and say, you're not quite there yet. So innovators are taking the risks that policymakers and big corporates can't. So we are way ahead. We're still not there yet, but we're taking risks that other people can't. We're trying, we're failing, we're reiterating to try to find the right solution.
But, Minister, isn't the MAX, the 737 MAX, a good example of a case where 4IR, which is effectively what MCAS is in some shape or form, highly sophisticated, but the regulator was able to be bamboozled rightly or not necessarily deliberately, but a set of circumstances were created that they were unable to realize what was happening.
I don't think the regulator will be able to review this sophisticated algorithm related to AI, and I don't think it's their job. Their job is to make sure that the product that will be created will benefit the people. It will not have impact or negative impact on other stakeholders, but I don't think it's the right example what we have with the 737 MAX. They have the regulator to make sure the control system is working. It was certified. Unfortunately, somewhere it got wrong. But I don't think this is a reason to stop or...
It's not a reason to stop, but it is a reason for government to pause and think about what government's role is in this. How does government create the environment, Mr. President, for technology, innovation, in this case, 4th IR, to flourish?
Well, government's, I think, primary responsibility is to know what they're talking about, to keep up with things. Because...
Did you know what you were talking about?
I thought I did, yes, at the time, but I was kind of a one-off, someone who I learned to code 50 years ago, and I'm 65, so I understood. But basically what you need to do, you need to have people in governments today that understand what is coming out of technology, and it is a more and more difficult task for governments because of Moore's law, which says that the power of a chip doubles every year and a half, so maybe it's extended now to every 2 years. Nonetheless, it is exponential growth, and governments still operate largely in a linear fashion, which we'd expect them to. But nonetheless, there is a new and increased importance to governments that regulate technology to actually understand the technology itself.
Understand it, Minister, but what do you do with it? I mean, let's take Bahrain as an example here. Where do you see this country's adoption of the new technologies in the economy?
I mean, look, what Bahrain is going through is exactly what the UAE went through, right? We're a tightly knit community, small population. We're very new to advanced manufacturing. We don't have any legacy issues. And then on top of all of that, we have a dynamic young workforce. So if anything, we can be a catalyst for positive change, positive disruption.
I think it's important to start with the context. I think everybody in this room agreed that the disruptive innovation will form the basis of the future successful modern economy. And if we want to compete, if we want to improve our productivities, we need to start as early as possible. For us as a policymaker, we want to enable this to happen. To enable it to happen, then we know very well that we are not in a better position than the innovators. They know more about their product. I think the only way to enable them to do what they want is to work with them and to explore all the...
So what's your role?
My role is, number one, I think, is to make sure that we have the digital infrastructure. There is no way you can have AI or robotic or autonomous car unless you have the fiber optic, nationwide fiber optic, unless you have 5G is deployed in your country. With the old technology, you will not be able to apply all this future AI. So I think making sure the infrastructure exists, making sure that you have enabling business environments, working with these people to enable them to work and to even to develop with them the regulation. And I think the third one, we need to unleash it from our countries rather than waiting from outside to come. And for this, we need to develop the innovation ecosystem where you have to address access to capital issues, the venue to accommodate all these people, accelerator, and all these things, as well as also attracting intelligent FDI to access.
There's a lot there. So there's a lot there for you to do, sir.
Yeah, I would say that we shouldn't say that there are innovators in the private sector and then there are the governments and regulators. What we did in my country relied on technology developed by other people. The innovation came on the part of the government, which was willing to do things that no one else yet had done.
But that was a different type of innovation. That was a governmental innovation rather than a technical innovation.
Well,
well, of course it is.
I mean, if you have a good government, you are willing to take what exists in the new technological environment and apply it. But you have to have the innovative understanding and also the political will to implement it, because otherwise you just look at it and go, that's nice, but that doesn't affect us. You need to be innovative in your thinking in governance.
Okay, so now I'm going to say the thing I'm not supposed to say, especially when we're talking with policymakers, but let me be really clear. I'm not criticizing government, I'm inviting government. Okay, and here's why I'm going to say that. In fact, for me, and by the way, I want to congratulate the country of Bahrain for hosting this. And I have to tell you, I've been here 3 times in the last 18... Thank you. I've been here 3 times in the last 18 months alone to this country. And the reason is because you invited me. And I really respect that, because it's a country that says, let's figure out how to make change, and is willing to do it. But there's a gap. And it's not just here, it's everywhere. When I come to these meetings, I spent this morning mentoring one of your entrepreneurs. In fact, I brought her here. It's a young lady named Amal who's trying to disintermediate the construction industry. She's an entrepreneur and an innovator. When I sit during the day with entrepreneurs, to be honest, they don't know what you guys do. They don't know what ministers do. They don't know how government works. So when you're asking an entrepreneur or an innovator, how can the government help you? They don't know, because they don't understand it. But the reverse is true. When I spend days, like last time I was here, I spend days with policymakers and government. They've never actually, typically, have not gone out and spent a day in an entrepreneur's little office. Okay? If you were to watch the ideation and the innovation process from ground up, you would have a better... It's hard to make policy for people that are not you.
Right, but ministers would rightly expect their offices to have filtered up to them.
Yeah, okay, I didn't mean ministers literally. I meant the organization. Yes.
Oh, right, right.
Thank you for correcting that. But there's a pretty simple solution that we're trying in a few places. Like in the United States, we have Bring Your Child to Work Day. What we need here is Bring an Innovator to Work Day, where we invite these innovators to come spend a day with you two and see what you do.
Have you had many innovators come and spend a day with you?
Let me clarify. He's the minister. I'm not. I represent the private sector.
Okay, well, of course, yes, you're the private sector. Yes, minister. Forgive me. Well, have you had many ministers? Let me reverse the question. You're the private sector. Have you had any ministers come and spend a day with you?
Absolutely. I mean, the UAE government, the Dubai government, the Abu Dhabi government, they listen, they incubate ideas, they promote deployment, and they regulate. but they do not stop the innovation from going forward.
I think for one time at least I will agree with the private sector. Yes, we need to do more. The most important things for us in Bahrain, we have a vision, we have a clear direction. We need to maximize the benefit of the...
What is that vision?
That we need to maximize the benefit of the fourth industrial revolution, but we need to engage, of course, with the private sectors, and we have to lead. We have to lead, I think, the way in adopting technology. And this is why the government in Bahrain, we have the e-government authorities. We started with ourselves. Today, we automated almost all our government services. You can apply for license, for application, for certificate. You can pay your transaction all online. The same thing is being done with the private sector. The government has created the institution, Labour Fund, we call it Tamkeen, which is enabling in English. And its role is to work with the private sector to enhance their productivity and competitiveness. How? By investing in technology and push them toward the high end of the value chain of their economic sector.
I would add here, since you mentioned that it's a small country, I would argue, and from my experience, and say that small countries do better in this regard, because the distance, the degrees of separation between the innovator and the government agency is far, far smaller. I mean, you can be visited by an entrepreneur in a small country, because you see that there's an interesting idea, you say, sure, come in. That is not possible, much more difficult in China or the United States or even Germany or France.
And that is why we're here, right? That's why I keep coming back here. I agree, because this is a country that's actually getting stuff done. So I agree with you.
So this is the sandbox argument.
This is a good sandbox.
You know, as somebody put it to me this morning, you know, in the UK, you can't really experiment and watch the entire economy go up in smoke. Whereas here, you can experiment and move in quickly if it's going wrong. Would that be the...
Bahrain, as I said, we want to encourage local talent as well as international talent to use Bahrain as a testbed. We have created the regional first sandbox in the fintech, the financial service sectors. And as I said, we have a graduate today. They are non-Bahrainis, but this is the only way to nurture innovation in our country.
Richard, let's make it clear, again, another clarification. We're not talking about digitizing services. Digitizing services, e-governments is something of yesterday. What we're talking about is how technology can do part of my function, part of my work, make my work easier. Let me be more efficient. Let me be more effective.
No, hang on. Explain what that means.
Robots, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, anything that makes me be more effective in what I do.
Right.
No, think about it. You have so much noise pollution, so much visual pollution, right? You want to start focusing your mind and your effort in something that matters.
So, go ahead.
I think I fully agree that the government, especially in the GCC, has passed that stage. We have already re-engineered our operating system and processes. We automate them, but however, what we have not done yet is using the massive amount of data that we have and processing them to provide quality services. And this is where the AI comes in. I cannot claim that we have done it across the board. Still, we have to do it. Actually, we have not even started in most of the area.
Right, but now you're starting to get to the difficult bit. Because now you're getting to the bit where, all roads in an AI debate always inevitably lead back to two things. Job losses in a workforce, and invariably somebody raises killer drones. At some point, any AI IR debate ends up with job losses and killer drones.
Two things. One, you have a hammer. A hammer has a good function and has a bad function. So if we use drones as an example of having bad functions, everything in life has a bad function.
Right. We'll come to both of those. My point on this is, what do you want? What do you see as the role for AI/IR in this economy?
I think maybe you are the expert, but to me, technology must benefit the people. We cannot create technology by the people, not to benefit the people. And I think the same argument and the same concern has been discussed in the first and the second and the third industrial revolution. We always thought that it will affect the employment at that stage, but I think
it did.
In the previous, but we have adopted. I think the people adopt and they change, and we reskilled our people, and today we have people.
But the difference was the first industrial revolution, the spinning jenny, and all of that affected a relatively small number of people in northern England and in those developed countries. The second, the third, and the third all affected a relatively specific sectors and a relatively small number. Manufacturing. This has the potential to affect the entire global workforce.
Well, it already is, and it's going to happen. By the way, Richard, if you're afraid of killer drones, the strategy is just be friends with the people that make the drones. Then you'll be safe.
If I see anything flying in here.
Yeah, call him immediately.
Call him,
It already is doing that, and there are so many. I completely agree with you, what you said. We can come up with all the bad things about AI. In fact, on the flight to Manama, I watched a movie that I'd never heard of called I Am Mother, about a robot who decided she could reinvent the human race because we're not very good at it. And, I always think of a story. In, 1907, there were 2 automobiles, 2 cars in the entire state of Kansas, and they collided. They crashed. And I always think of that because humans mess up everything, right? It's just the way it is. It's always going to be somebody's going to do the wrong thing. But there's so much right. Let me just give you one quick example. In AI, there are people, I have just been on a tour of visiting innovation in about 90 different countries. There are people in the middle of nowhere that have no access to any service. Somebody that's sick, I've got a rash on my arm. So then I just saw the demo of the AI doctor. Okay, I can't get to a good doctor or a good hospital where I live, but I literally hold this up to a camera on my device. An artificially intelligent doctor, my doctor, would say, I think I've seen this before. Let me see if I can find the file. The AI doctor looks at 4 million patient records of anybody everywhere in the world, what treatment worked, all in 30 seconds, and says, I know exactly what you have. I can cure you. So it's already being developed, these kinds of technologies, and the good uses are already starting to rise up the food chain.
Why do my hackles go up at that story, which has got... maybe it's just the journalist in me, that as I hear that story, the first thing I want to say is, yeah, but you need some doctor's mentality rather than just relying on an algorithm.
But you do. Think about this. Think about his case. If the pilot came on and said, good evening, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not actually touching anything. A computer's flying the plane, landing the plane.
Well, they did. They did on my flight back from New York. They did. We were coming back into London and... from New York, and there was fog on the ground, and they made it quite clear.
For safety reasons. They
made it quite clear it was an auto land, which is not unusual, but they specifically requested all handheld devices to be switched off, which was slightly terrifying.
Self-driving cars, are you ready to get in one yet? We're just not out yet. Have you? Well, you have. It's your job.
And I was terrified.
It's your job.
I was absolutely... How many people in here have been in a self-driving car? Has anybody in here been in a self-driving car?
How about a car with a teenager? That's actually worse.
We're going to take some questions from the audience in a moment, so feel free to head your... we'll put the lights up. So whoever's working the lights, when we get to it, we'll put the lights up.
That's also robot-controlled in here, just so you...
Oh, I assure you. In which case, yes, Mr. President.
I just want to say that, I don't want to deal with killer drones. There are solutions for that. But on the unemployment,
right.
every industrial revolution has created unemployment. Every time it's gone away. Our experience, which in fact we ended up shifting a lot of people from jobs that were bureaucratic jobs that took lots of time, and they ended up with new and better jobs. Society will change. You need new things. When you get cars, you suddenly have to build roads and you have to build overpasses, and we are going to see the same thing. I think that far more interaction between people and the people they serve is going to be seen in this new era than before, when you had basically 90% of the people were behind in some office.
That's a wonderful view of how it might be. However, the numbers involved, and if you look at every study, there's no agreement on it. The size and number involved could be so huge that surely it's incumbent on governments to be putting in place policies to handle it, and they are not.
Depends on the government. But certainly I would be... My first focus would be on what is the nature of education, what are we preparing our young people for today, what we were prepared for was a world that, in fact, is already gone, and in fact, we need to think about the world that is coming when it comes to education.
I think it's a journey, and the process will happen over a period of time.
No, but you see, it won't. The experts say the job losses will be faster than you are creating.
I think the job losses will happen. Some jobs will disappear, and some jobs will be reduced. And simply because AI will lead to more improved decision-making process. So sometimes decision will be even done automated by machine, but it doesn't mean that you need the people. You don't need the people. You need the people to do something more value for them, to create knowledge, for example, and innovate. And of course, also always you will need people. When you use the example of analyzing medical records over multiple clinic and visits, and over a period of time to detect early disease, it cannot be done by a doctor today, but in the future it will be done. So it's a tool that will help the doctors to do their job. I don't think we don't need doctors. We will need doctors, but they will have the tool to take a more informed decision.
Richard, you spoke about the fourth industrial revolution. The key thing there is the internet. Think about the internet connecting to the device or whatever else it is. So when we're talking about job losses, right, just imagine how many jobs are we going to need with cybersecurity professionals to enter this area, right? Everything is data-driven. You're exposing yourself to hackers. This is what's happening. When you talk about AI, AI is not just about structured data, it's about unstructured data as well. So it's able to understand simple language. Hence, I feel more comfortable with an AI doctor than some of the doctors we have to imagine that has personal problems in their lives.
And if I can add something, I don't know if I am dreaming or not, but AI will make all services are available 24/7 days by AI. This means that maybe at one stage you will reduce the working hour of a human being, and this is good because this will give them a decent life. They can do more of entertainment for themselves as long as they can earn the same amount of money.
I was going to say, well, there are going to be a lot of brand new jobs. Somebody has to clean up the accidents from self-driving cars. I'm just kidding.
But it's true.
But here's the thing. Here's the good news. We are going to lose a lot of jobs at a fast rate, but the part people don't mention is they're jobs, for the most part, that no one wanted anyway. No one grew up saying, I really hope I can spend my life working in a factory on an assembly line. But we have factories.
No, but you're going to have the problem of those people not in work. Truck drivers, factory workers, lower clerical workers whose jobs have gone. And unless people like you start thinking about policies training, which is a multi-generational undertaking.
But they both brought out good points. You are correct that those people can be redeployed to useful things. How about somebody answering the phone at some website anywhere in the world? Right? Any website you call, no one answers the phone. Why don't we deploy those people to talking to humans and helping? So that's where the president's answer was right. Our education system needs to start training the next generation of employees, and it is not.
Let's take some questions, and then we're going to move to a completely different area, which is how the Gulf can lead in this, and how Bahrain can lead, more than just by being a test bed. Anybody questions? Put your hand up if you have a question. If not, yes. Hang on. I'll leave you. I'm coming back to you, lot. Don't go away. Yes, where are you? Over here. Do you have a microphone? Yes, go ahead. Let's have the lights up for this part of it. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, how are you? I would like to thank you for the panel discussion. My name is Irfan Karamat Ali.
Yes.
My question is that we started a new technology back in 1997 in Bahrain. It was called NetFax, a fax over IP. And the system worked for a couple of years, and then it did not continue because we were in competition with Batelco. So my question is, if I have a technology right now, and that is innovative technology, and it's not in Bahrain, what is the easiest way to go and start my business in Bahrain? Because I don't have investment, and I don't have... Are
you doing a pitch?
I would say that was a pitch.
I think you have to admire the yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm not alone. I have many university students here. I met them.
Is anybody willing to lend this man money?
He can go.
Good.
I'll give you a hint. Look at the white chairs for the money.
Okay.
I think the question is, how does investment, how is an environment created, Jeff, that allows investment into these, the funding mechanism that doesn't either get cut off by the monopolies or by regulation, but allows for proper... You all want to join in on this.
I think for us, the role of the government is to make sure that we have a level playing field. We need to make sure that access to capital is available in our countries. And I think anybody who has a viable business venture, he will easily get access to any bank. But also, we have created a fund called Al-Waha, and it's mainly dedicated for technology-related projects, and he can approach them if he has a good ideas.
Do you see it as government's job to pick winners?
I think winners will find their way without government, because if they have a viable business opportunity, as I said, and a great idea, they will find people around them.
Government funding schemes generally don't fit in with innovation because, and we can see this in the European Union, where there's been a complete failure on the part of funding for innovation because you apply for a project and then, but innovate, and you will do this in 3 years, but innovation doesn't work that way.
Right.
You go, no, in the process of innovating, you discover you're doing something altogether different. And the governments can't deal with that.
But should the tax code be used as a way to stimulate or to facilitate innovation? If you're not going to do grants, should there be some form of tax credits, some form of tax advantages in that sense?
I would say you need a strong venture capitalist environment, which is available in the United States, and the loss of many other countries that they do not have that venture capitalist risk-taking funding environment that is absolutely necessary for innovation to work, and why innovators tend to move to the U.S.
Richard, do you know one of the things that, this is a Chamber of Commerce event, right? So one of the things that you have in the Gulf is that you have a trader mentality. It's the worst thing that you want to break out of. In this part of the world, the big opportunity is for the family businesses. Let's get out of the trader mentality. Let's look at these innovative ideas. Let's start spending some of that investment and pushing it towards innovative ideas.
So I completely agree.
But?
It's not even a but. It's good news. There's a layer right in between the government and the big funding. And the gentleman that spoke is a small business, correct? And at that small business stage, you don't get the big dollars from the big entities. And you are correct that the family businesses, which are prevalent in the Gulf, but here's the good news. The business angel network concept is growing rapidly in the Gulf. I am going from here to actually help host a business angel network. It's being held in Riyadh, but it's business angels. It's family business owners from all over the Gulf that are saying, how do we fund him? So it's growing, and it's that layer of business angels and private families investing in local startups where they live that are going to give those innovations a chance to
Now, the President pointed out, one of you pointed out that the JV money, the big JV money, tends to be out of the US. But my understanding is that those institutions are very well aware that the next big idea might be coming from this part of the world or from some other part of the world, and are constantly scouring to find that. Is that right?
That is right, and it's new. Estonia helped create that, with the founder being from Skype. We've encountered the Prezi people there. Yes, but it's new. The Americans have finally said, and I'm going to speak, maybe I won't be welcomed back into my country, but the Americans finally said, wait a minute, there's good ideas everywhere, we need to find them. So American VCs are now spreading out, but so is everybody else, right? In a couple of weeks, I'll be in Africa, and African investment is growing internally. The Africans are saying, like you should in the Gulf, those are our innovators, those are our citizens, those are ideas, we want to support them. I've seen great growth in that right here in the Gulf.
I think for a country like Bahrain, we found it's important to stimulate and to encourage a number of players to create this fund, because I think access to capital is always a barrier to compete in this area. Not necessarily it will be the government fund, but it can be a semi-government organization. In Bahrain, we have used the fees paid by the private sector to employ expats. We used it to finance part of this fund of the fund. We call it for only technology-related project. So I think we need to support them to nurture the growth, because I think the last thing that investors want to put money in venture capital, that the risk is so high, and therefore for a country, a small country for us, we need to do something.
Another question, I think, from our guest here. Yes. If I don't kill myself on these. Let me just see, first of all, so I get a gauge of who wants to speak. You want a question? There's one over here, a few over there. Oh, splendid. We're off to the races. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, first of all, thank you very much for the very informative panel. My name is Kai Mietig. I'm a founder of Waste, and I call it Waste-Trepreneur because we're trying to use or implement AI for the waste management in buildings. AI plays a certain role in all fields, and my question is, now when you have the fourth industrial revolution, we have the AI technology, and I know that Emirates, Mr. Badr, they are developing the mission to have a colony on Mars by 2090. So you have already the fifth industrial revolution. My question is, how can we share the AI not only related to what's happening now here on Earth, because it's a danger of the planet, but for the AI in the future when it comes to space?
How do you mean, how can you share it?
No, right now we're talking AI for the human, mankind, which is priority.
All right.
But what comes next? Because the development is very fast, and I mean, UAE has a vision 2030, 2050, Bahrain 2030, 2050, which is not there for Europe, actually.
Okay, wait, can you phrase that into a question? I want to make sure I understood the question.
Right, so at the moment, we're looking at AI as it relates to humanity. What comes after that?
Well
I mean, to some extent, we're so new on AI that you might arguably be looking too far ahead.
True. Here's I think it's exciting. Some people think it's terrifying, and it's the fact that we actually have no idea what the answer to that question is. None of us ever thought that we would be buying a house on our phone. We never thought we'd be buying a car on our phone. Nobody predicted that properly. There's so many trends that we don't see coming. We accept them really quickly. Like we said, now when you buy a new car, it can parallel park. You take your hands off the wheel and it parks itself. That's a massive, AI function no one thinks about. So I don't think we see it coming yet.
Well, I would suggest reading Homo Deus by Yuval Harari, who largely sees the hybridization of human beings over the next centuries. But I don't want to get into that either.
Did you want to join in?
I just want to say, the answer is simple. The next thing is going to be planet Earth. It's going to be about sustainability. UNIDO drives this. It calls about inclusive and sustainable industrial development. That's where AI will make a positive difference. After humanity, it's about taking care of planet Earth.
Thank you very much.
Hang on.
This was exactly the answer what I expecting.
Let me ask. We'll come to you next. How many people have travelled in to Bahrain for this conference? How many people flew in? Of the people with their hands up, keep your hand up if you did your carbon emissions. Did you actually pay? One person over there. What does that tell us?
Huge opportunities upcoming.
The lady over there. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Rose Marad from Bahrain FinTech Bay. Just a quick question, sort of a follow-up to the question before, which is, within the Gulf, especially besides financial services industry, which other industries do you see seeing as emerging when it comes to utilizing AI?
Here in the region? Yes, good, excellent question. For the Minister, I think we can start with.
I think AI and this revolution is not changing the industry itself, but it's changing the nature of services provided in this industry. So financial services will exist, but it will exist in a different way. We are using today our telephone to do all our financial transactions. Entertainment, the same thing. The same thing applicable to automation, our factories today. This is the.
But how ready is FinTech? Always seems to be a sort of an easy buy on that because it's people sitting in front of screens and doing things.
I think healthcare will.
I would say, look at what you have done here. The most successful innovation in FinTech is by an Estonian company called TransferWise that uses the halal banking system to do cross-border money transfers. Something that that they were brilliant by taking something that existed 2,000 years ago and digitized it, and they are killing the cross-border banking system right now.
Another question over here. Microphone to the gentleman. Stand up. Thank you.
Hey, Richard, while you're waiting, let me just give you a quick example
of
how all the fourth industrial revolution comes together for sustainability. It's amazing what innovators are already doing. I'm just going to do two really fast examples. Two of the startups we work with. One of them has invented an army of drones that can plant 1 billion trees a year with
I knew drones would end in
with no human intervention. The drones find the place, they dig, they plant the trees. 1 billion trees a year with no humans, all drones. That is, there's another one that is, this makes sense here, that is creating drinking water with a machine they made out of thin air. It sucks the humidity out of the air and it outputs drinking water in places that have no access to water. Innovators are already using the fourth industrial revolution to address the planet's problems.
Sir.
Yes, thank you very much, gentlemen, for this.
Speak up.
Thank you very much for this very good information for this. I have, my name is Mohammed from AGU University, PhD students. Regarding His Excellency, the term of small innovation countries, how has globalization influenced innovation policies for small countries in terms of absorptive capacity and internal capability?
Right, what's the problem that you see?
There is no problem. My question is, how has globalization influenced innovation policies for small countries?
It's what we were talking about. Thank you, sir. It's what we were talking about earlier. Mr. President, start with you. The ability of a small country to innovate, which you say is greater than a large country. I mean, the US exception. Perhaps.
Well, no, I think, in terms of number of unicorns, we're number one per capita right now. So that's already proof that something's working. I would say basically necessity is the mother of invention and always has been. And if you're a small country, you have a lot of problems that you have to deal with.
Right.
And that's what you will do here if you want to. And then your solutions will be available to other countries.
Now, let me grasp one area that is a thorny nettle. And it is the ability in the Gulf to handle technologies and innovations that require, for example, a greater selection of freedoms, a greater opportunities, the ethical questions, that the regulatory environment here is not as conducive to that. So, Jeff, do you see this as an issue?
I do see it as an issue, and I see...
What is the issue?
The issue is talent, retaining talent. The most talented, you need the most talented, no, I'm going to say young, all ages, but you need the most talented young Bahrainians to stay, the youngest, the talent needs to stay here. You need them to innovate their country and help you here. And so I'm using that as an example in any country where that's what the issue is. If they don't believe they have whatever the freedom or the policy is for them to be able to launch and create and innovate and try and fail here, they'll just go somewhere else and do it. So that's the problem, is we have to retain our most talented people. They're here, and you have them. But for any country, they won't stay if they don't feel like they have the freedom to innovate, to try.
Already now, and from now on, the competition between states and governments will be for brains, not for anything else. And if countries start competing for brains, they will do it on the basis of the amenities and the rights and freedoms that they offer to people, and that's where people will go.
Okay, but within that competition for brains, what will be the fighting ground? I mean, one could arguably say Silicon Valley, the fighting ground is how big will your stock options be that, you can create a mansion even bigger than your next door neighbor. You're shaking your head.
The United States did not understand its critical advantage among other countries. Right now, by knocking down H-1B visas, it is losing its competitive advantage at an incredible rate, and the brains are going elsewhere because it's so hard to go work in Silicon Valley.
And you have to have the layer of the millennial generation, because this generation is not solely focused on the size of their mansion anymore. So when you're competing...
So what are they focused on?
They are much more focused, and I'm going to say this, I just told you, been visiting millennials and schools all over the world for the last 5-6 years in a row. They are focused on impact. When I talked to the young people here, when I was here last spring, a lot of them said, I want to look up one day at Bahrain and say, I helped design the future of this country. They care about impact. They care about values. They don't only care about money, like I will say a lot of my generation did.
Of course, everybody is fighting for brains and want to attract them, but I think the most important thing for a small country for us to attract them. And to attract them is to be flexible and agile and to understand what will bring them to our country to fulfill their dreams. So this is what we are working on. But also, at the end of the day, you need a quality higher education institution. You need education system that graduates people with ideas and innovators. Today, this is the area that we have to work hard on it. We don't have the Silicon Valley in America or in Europe. So I think this is the most challenge that the GCC country is facing today. And we
Well,
should
would
do
you
much
say
better in this.
education, yes. But what about issues such as privacy amongst the GCC countries? You know, at one level, you know, the necessity to recognise the individual right to privacy that is growing. If you take, for example, GDPR in the United Kingdom, in Europe.
I think privacy is a global issue and it's not a GCC issue. We need to protect privacy of people and protecting the information of people, and we have to empower consumer to control their information. However, we have to balance also in order to enable all this innovator to create their knowledge. At the end of the day, we are using all the same law. The GDPR in Europe is almost the similar law that we have in Bahrain to protect data. It's still a new area.
Yeah,
I don't think
GDPR
anybody has the right formula to
But
enable.
GDPR was imposed in the sense that the Europeans decided, rightly or wrongly, this was going to be the standard. And because the EU is so large, once it became the standard in the EU, de facto, there are very few companies, global companies, that wouldn't follow. Yes, Mr. President.
I would say that, yes, GDPR was a result. I mean, it is right for Europe. We like it. But I see three general models developing. There is the surveillance capitalism in the United States, where all of your data is used to create ads. There is the algorithmic authoritarianism model that you see in much of the Eurasian mass, to be politically correct, that basically is the U.S. model plus a big wire that goes to the party or the government. And then there's the European model, which is much more focused than either one on the privacy of the citizen. Which one will dominate? It's hard to tell, because each of them has their advantages. And that's a choice that each of us we will have to make.
We've got about 5 minutes left, so I want to get through as many questions. Oh, you've been waiting a while. Microphones will go to yourself, and then the lady over here, microphone over here, and then we'll wrap it up. Microphone for this gentleman, please. Yes, sir.
The new normal is that the moment a machine can do something more efficient than a human being, that job is commoditized and it should not be done by a human being. This is a reality. So you will find that no young people would like to be a truck driver once you have an autonomous truck driving. You'll find out that they don't want to be a taxi driver. You know, so this is a reality. They will go, the young people, to find a new opportunity, something that uses a brain and value add.
If they're trained and educated so they're able to.
Yes, they are trained. In Bahrain, I can tell you they are very well trained.
Right, next one. The lady, somebody over here. Yes, ma'am.
But I think we agree with him that these are the jobs they don't want anyway, that will get automated.
Right, but if they're not qualified to do anything else afterwards, Minister, I mean, you're just going to end up with an unemployed workforce. I mean, I'm exaggerating at some level.
I think education is a process, should not stop. We have to improve our education system. Right. We have a controlled unemployment issue in Bahrain, but it doesn't mean that you will not have it if we don't improve our education.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dawla Al-Mulla, accounting and audit instructor from University of Bahrain. Okay, so far we have been talked all about advantages of AI. I would like to hear some disadvantages in regard to AI implementations.
The biggest disadvantage of AI, sir, Badr.
Garbage in, garbage out. It's the best way of saying it. You know, AI cannot assess the information that it's getting. So if it's garbage that's coming in, you'll get, garbage reaction.
It's not good enough yet in many areas.
Well, that's just a question of time, isn't it?
That's true, but that's the biggest disadvantage, is you don't want to apply AI to areas where it is not yet at the level where it should be and leads to mistakes, as we see with people being killed by self-driving cars.
But isn't it, let me challenge you on that. Isn't it inevitable that AI has to be tried on areas and there has to be mistakes, as there were with aviation before the plane was invented and the automobile?
There are two problems. One of them is that was a human error. They forgot to plug in what happens if a pedestrian does not cross in the crosswalk, and that led to the event. And that is a human failure, a lack of imagination on the part of the designer. The next problem, which is far more complex, is when AI is designed by AI and people don't know what the black box is doing.
MCAS. Right. There, you get the last question. It had better be a good one. Go on. Your microphone to the gentleman here, the last one. Yes, madam, I can see you, but unfortunately we're out of time.
We know worldwide that the unemployment rate is high now.
Right.
Worldwide.
Yeah.
Worldwide. So it's because of economic changes and, digital economy is coming in. The thing is, in our countries, it's a small country, okay, to not leave things vague. We have to be specific. How many jobs will be created? How many jobs would be lost? We have to be specific. This is not a small issue for us to keep it vague.
I don't think anybody can over-engineer the economy. It never happened in the past. It will not happen in the future. Things are dynamic and changing. We need at least to plan. We need to plan, but it doesn't mean that you will end up getting what you are planning for.
Well, there's a gentleman with the microphone. Should we give him one more question? Go on.
Thank you.
We've still got 3 more panels to go tonight. Go on.
My name is Badr Al-Olama from Saudi Arabia. We talked about innovation and regulation. So there is a balance between both innovation and regulation. And good minds, they always move to less regulated countries. But the problem, the less regulations you have, the more frauds you have, and with innovation. So is there any magical balance between innovation and regulation?
The magical balance.
I think this is what we have talked about earlier, all of us here, that we need. It is new things. Innovators have their own ideas, and policymaker and regulator must sit with them, understand their constraint, and study the impact of all what they are doing in all stakeholders, and keep in mind protecting all stakeholder interests.
Final question from me to you all. This is on a personal level, have you reached the stage yet where there's been a technological development? We're all men and women of a certain age at one level, where something has developed. There's a new technology, there's a new feature on the phone, there's a new bit of the computer, and you just think, I can't handle this. I don't know what it does. I can't even set the video clock. Do you ever feel it's getting away from us as we get older?
Oh, you were about to answer. Go ahead.
Go on.
Well, there are just things that really don't turn me on. I mean, Instagram, my daughters are on it, but I don't care. It's not a matter of not being able to.
Do you feel you should be on it?
No, I don't. I'd rather read a book.
How novel. Sir?
I mean, I can't figure out how the cloud works. I know there's a cloud. I know that people store stuff in the cloud. They work with each other in the cloud. But how it works, I have no idea.
Minister?
I think this is back to the question raised there about the risk and the negative things. And to me, it's trust. and technology and the data privacy. It will always be looming around with people, especially with cybersecurity and all these things. I think it can collapse all what you are talking about if something big happen in this area.
Jeffrey.
Yeah, I think it's the one we've been talking about. It's not one that I, like you said, that I'm not put off by, but it's the whole discussion we're having about what do we do with all these people that get displaced. Because as I'm out there, I see more and more technology, like I said, whether it's tree planting or artificial intelligence, doctors, think about that.
But do you ever get worried you're going to get left behind? That you're not, there's going to be an iPhone or an Android development, and you're going to think, I can't be bothered.
You know what I think is funny? That this thing is my phone, right? That's what it started as, a phone. But you know what? I do GPS, I do email, I do text, I do WhatsApp. If I could delete one annoying app on my phone, I would delete phone, because I don't like it when people call anymore, because it kills my productivity. I never saw that coming, that I don't like it when my phone rings anymore. So we just don't know. It's the uncertainty of when you wake up tomorrow, what's going to be new that none of us ever thought of, and what happened to those people's jobs. It keeps me up at night.
We will publish Jeff's phone number so that you can all call him at the most inconvenient moment. Ladies.
Richard, one last question for you.
No.
Would you accept CNN paying you in bitcoins? that is we want to know that.
That's funny.
And remember, Rani is sitting there. So this is...
Ladies and gentlemen, our panel. Excellent question.
That was great. Thank you very much indeed to all of you. If I may add a little comment, just to make this a little bit more personal, talking about AI there, and I was chairing an AI discussion recently, and one thing that came up in the conversation was about what would you want your children who you love dearly to train for? And one of the experts gave a single piece of advice, which was, if you have children, do not allow them to train as lawyers, because in the next 10 to 20 years, there will be no need for lawyers because artificial intelligence is already taking it over. Can I just go back a little bit to some of the Slido comments that we had earlier on? It appears that you were able to see the results, but I wasn't. There were many, many questions, and the two most common questions so far that have been submitted are, where are the belly dancers? Thank you. And the other question was, is this sponsored by Microsoft? No, it's not. Let me just explain to you what I mean by that. I used some examples earlier on that everybody uses, but we discovered that not everybody does. So the OneNote question was fascinating. You are the highest number of users per group that I've seen in a long time, because the average is normally 10 to 15%, but you were 28%. So that was absolutely fabulous. Now, we're going to take a 10-minute break now, and we'll be coming back with Richard's second panel discussion, where we'll be talking about something that did crop up in that last session, which was about funding, new models to funding. What are the challenges within this region? I'm sure you'll find that extremely interesting. So we'll be back in 10 minutes' time. Thank you very much.